thought you meant like the teacher says, clap once if you hear me. Clap twice.
All right.
Okay.
Are you ready, Keegan? 3, 2, 1. This is what's left.
He told him to clap, dude. It's the truth.
3, 2,
For the show notes.
1.
The show.
This is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is taping live from Dean's downtown, right in the heart of downtown Houston. And boy, we are excited. We have a huge studio audience. Listen to them roar. What's Left America is produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends, and hopefully someday friends just like you. Today on the show, we're going to cover two great topics: midterm watch, the closing arguments, and Google, open to all men. And of course, we'll end the show, as always, with Out of Left Field. Let's get right into the show. Midterm watch, the closing arguments. President Trump's final argument is hate, fear, and divide. Is that the pathway to victory? It does keep us from talking about health care. President Trump said the election is about whether we keep control or let the Democrats take control of Congress. They want to let illegal immigrants in and to invade our country and take over your schools.
Well, it was a positive, uplifting message that the president closed us out on. But I think they may have misfired this time around based on some of the recent polling that's coming out. And I think the Democrats were pretty clever keying in on health care from the very start and really making an election.
And Barack Obama's been out really attacking on that, really attacking the president on that message and attacking the Republicans who are supporting him on that message.
But we're going to see. I mean, we are going to see if this whole Trump message that worked, the first time around is going to get another victory lap. And I think it's highly doubtful. I think people are a little bit fed up.
The first time around is this year, and then the second time?
2016 and 2018, he's trying to do the whole division tactics that he used before, and I just think it's kind of worn out its welcome. I don't know what y'all think.
I don't know. I was the New York Times did a story today about how white nationalist groups are growing, and because of politics, there's been no government statistics record keeping on who these people are, how many groups there are. But now, as we begin to recognize that they're a threat, we're finding out we don't really know anything about it. Who's dangerous and who do we need to look out for? I was glad I mentioned
domestic
this because
groups, right, Andy? Domestic
groups. And since you said that, one of the points was that there have been more violence, hate-related, white nationalist-related incidents than there have been any kind of domestic terrorist incidents by a factor of maybe 4. And I mentioned that because I've been very upset about the way the press has been covering Trump. We're covering his Twitter feed and not covering the issues. So good to see that. And I feel like we're finally figuring out how to cover news in this age of Trump.
The economy gave President James a little bit of a bump. Economy made 250,000 jobs in October, and unemployment is at a 5-decade low of 3.7%. Gave him something.
Right, and you would think that would be a positive message that he talks about on the campaign stump, and he alludes to it and then goes back to his fear and scare tactics. I think Stephen Colbert made a really funny point that talking about the caravan, saying that it's careening towards America at the speed of walk. And so, it's ridiculous that you have this positive message. And when Reagan was president, not that I was a Reagan fan, but when he was president, he talked about morning in America. And with Trump, it's like, nighttime in America. And unfortunately, the Republican Party has taken that message on. On the economy, yes, that's a positive message, but we also have to look at the economy under Barack Obama. And to me, this is a continuation, and Trump has been able to build on that. But the problem with Donald Trump is that he can't take a victory lap and stop. He has to stump on his opponents and, take other presidents to task for what they
But
didn't
James,
do.
so one of the reasons,
And here's what I got. One final point. So I think
you
that,
know, you get to speak at other times during the broadcast.
I
This
understand
isn't your
that.
only your
well, I
one
appreciate
shot.
that, but I don't. You know, you're gonna go back to your Bobby Kennedy soliloquy, and I'm gonna be like out of thoughts. But one final point: this economy is good now, but the chickens haven't came home to roost, and I'm talking about the deficit, meaning, you know, we'll talk about a little later, but you know, this economy is being propped up largely by subsidies, especially the farm industry from Donald Trump's government and administration. And so I'm not sure that once the chickens come home to roost, that the dynamics aren't
Well,
going to
that's
change.
probably why he's staying away from it to some degree, because he doesn't want to own it completely. Because a lot of people say all the factors are in place for it to explode, and if it does, he's going to say that's the Democrats' fault.
Under the Bush term, that took almost the entire 8 years before the economy crashed. Right before Barack Obama took office is when the economy crashed.
But also, Chris, if you look at the polling, the American people only give Trump the credit for the economy by a very small percentage, about 7% spread between who gets the credit, Barack Obama or Donald Trump. And so he can't do a clean victory lap on that. So maybe that's why
And he knows
gone back to what he does best.
And anyway, we don't want the economy. We don't want to win because the economy crashed.
Yeah.
We want to win because we have ideas.
That's
But what
exactly
James is
right.
saying is they should be wanting to win because he talks about how great the economy is, but instead he's ended with this extraordinarily negative message.
Well,
Kind of shows you where
Divide.
he's really coming from.
Divide, and that's how I win.
And the people that really make up his base are not the ones who benefited by the economy. His rich friends have benefited by
That-
college.
he's not going to any of those places.
Of course.
He's only going to places
Very few.
he's not going to places
And the irony of the whole immigration discussion is that the support is strongest in places like Iowa and Idaho and Nebraska, where they have, like, you know, cities teeming with Mexicans and blacks and Asians, and we know that's not true. And so, you know, Trump could, if he really wanted to be presidential, could have a closing argument that talks about the economy, talks about growth, and all those things that Americans agree on. But he has to continue to race monger, fear monger, and do all
he
those
doesn't want to be
things.
presidential. Now, my wife brought this up this morning. We were watching one of the shows, and they were showing
Well, I'm glad you listened to your wife,
Yeah,
Chris.
no, I didn't say I listened. She brought this, but we were watching one of the Sunday shows, and they were showing a clip from one of his rallies yesterday, and behind him was an American Indian wearing a headdress.
Okay.
And my wife said, "Now, why would anybody go to his rally after what he's done to the American Indians wearing a headdress?" I promise you, they paid that guy.
That's like the
because-
African American prop.
I said they're paying that guy because first, no American Indian wears a headdress today, and so they're paying that guy to stand back there, and it's
Yes.
disgusting.
Well,
that
if
they're
true,
doing
that really is disgusting.
Well,
but you
Hey,
know,
when's the last time you saw an American Indian wearing a headdress that wasn't performing?
yeah, that's crazy town. But you know, look, it's all about him, obviously, and he doesn't get a lot of attention on himself when he talks about the economy. First of all, he probably doesn't know how to talk about the economy because he doesn't understand the economy. But what I find disheartening is all the Republicans in Congress who so readily go along with his hate mongering.
Yeah.
That to me is astounding.
I-
This is what scares me about the country today.
I predict at least 33 of them will have be selling insurance in January. That's
Well,
my prediction.
Don't,
Why do they have
don't
to sell
malign
insurance?
Well,
insurance
it's just
That's a good fallback.
yeah, that's a good fallback job. All right, let's talk about President Obama at a rally.
Yeah, that was good.
Last week. He was interrupted by a "Make America Great Again" supporter, and he was interrupted, and he stopped the guy, and he said, "There's an interesting observation I want to make." Did y'all see this? Interesting
Yeah.
observation I want to make. Why is it that the folks that won the last election are so mad all the time? When I won the presidency, at least my side felt pretty good. You know, it tells you something interesting, that even the folks who are in charge are still mad because they're getting ginned up to be mad all the time. And I thought it was a really great moment.
That is because Trump's news outlet, Pravda, Fox News, basically keeps people angry. Like last week, I did a little exercise. I think I texted all of y'all that I listened to Fox News on the radio, and I watched it, and I was angry just looking at all of the stuff that they were reporting about. They made the caravan into this huge issue. They made the army mobilizing to go down to the border, a big thing. Like we were getting ready to go into World War III.
You want to talk about fake news?
Yeah, and so when you hear Barack Obama and Oprah speaking on the stump, they basically talk to the aspirational aspects of what we want to be as Americans and who we want to be, and they raise the question, who do you want to be? And I think when Barack Obama says that, he's basically asking a rhetorical question about, why are these people angry? The economy's good, things.
They won.
Yeah, they won. What are you angry about?
Well, two things. You sent out an article, I think, from the Atlantic about Newt Gingrich, and it's a song I've been singing
That was a great.
It
story.
is, and it's a song I've been singing for a long time now. That it's basically Newt Gingrich and Tom DeLay that created the environment that we find ourselves in, and they pointed out in that article about how Newt Gingrich made it a point to teach Republicans, up and coming Republicans, how they needed to be nastier, and and all of these are pages out of that playbook that's been around for years and years. And just a personal note, because Andy loves it when we pull up the Cracker Barrel and I tell an old tale.
I really do.
But so
pass the cheddar.
I used to tell the story on the stump that when coming of age as an adult, I would get in horrible fights at bars and cocktail parties and on weekend trips. I had a lot of Republican friends, and they loved, let's just say something negative about the Democratic Party or say something racist, and let's get Chris going. And it worked every time, and I'd be angry and we'd be screaming. One friend actually took a pool cue up to my face one time. I mean, we would really go forward. And so I would tell people this down the road after I got in politics, and they'd say, well, you just don't seem like that kind of guy that you would get that angry. And I said, well, I'm not. There are a couple things that happened. Ann Richards was elected governor, and 2 years later, Bill Clinton was elected president. And that took the place of years of anger therapy for me, because we had finally won. And why people can't just accept that and feel kind of good about the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The backlash,
so
right?
that's a very
I got
good
I got to
Yeah.
point out one other thing about why Trump and the voters are so angry. So there was a Vox survey that showed that minority voter turnout will probably be up, but also Trump's final argument may drive more of his base and those voters sitting on the fence to the polls. And so that means that you have to have other factors to get the blue wave that everybody's predicting, like minorities are voting above their percentage levels for midterms.
Right.
But
that's what I was about to bring
Well,
up.
fear, and that's a very legitimate point, James, because fear is the greatest motivating factor. Most people vote against and not for. And so that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
And throwing out everything
And-
he possibly can.
wait,
to
here's-
move
Let's just get into that, because voters are certainly energized for this midterm. The voting is up 40%. This time, early voting totals in 27 states have exceeded the early voting totals in the 2014 midterm election. And in Texas, where we are, there was 4 million early votes cast. Now, I want you to listen to this. That exceeds the entire voting for the 2014 midterm election. The early voting
in Texas
this time exceeded the entire voting for the 2014 midterm
counting
election.
election day.
yeah.
Counting election day.
Right.
So there's been more votes cast already than the entire 2014 midterm election.
So
That's
who,
huge.
Who do we believe that favors?
Well, I don't know who that favors, but I have to believe that favors the Democrats.
Well, I don't think it's going to be by the margin that we hope for.
Yeah.
But if you look at the number of young people who are voting for the first time, I just don't think most of those people are coming out because they were so energized by this Trump administration.
Yeah.
A lot of them are minorities. I mean, it seems like a lot of these pitches to different groups that have been traditionally have horrible voter turnouts, I think it's finally resonating.
Now,
maybe.
there's an ABC News poll that just came out that I sent y'all this morning. You don't read my stuff, so you probably haven't seen it. But,
No, Chris, we
ABC
did.
I know Andy read it because she saw
I
the
read
note
it.
I left for her.
Finally.
And the
How many
ABC
weeks has it been?
That's right. ABC News says that the races Democrats are preferred by 50% to 43% rank, and that there's a slight decline from last month when Democrats led in a generic congressional ballot by 11 points, and even bigger a drop from August when Democrats led by 14 points, which I don't find troubling because as you get closer to an election, you always see a tightening of polls, and that's natural when you have undecided voters starting to make up their minds. So I don't find that troubling. This is what I did find interesting. Trump's overall approval rating among adults stands at 40%, holding steady from an earlier poll early in October was slightly higher at 36%. Here's what I dislike about the way they reported this. However, among registered voters, Trump's approval rating is 44%. So they're reporting out a 40% approval rating among everyone when that's people that aren't going to vote anyway. And I think that's disturbing that they're making this report that Trump is disliked by 40% when there's not, that includes people that aren't going to vote, when his real approval rating among registered voters is 44%. I find that troubling. I find that kind of it's not a fake news thing, but it's kind of troubling that that's the way they're reporting it.
Well, it's still not a very attractive number.
No, but what they're saying is you have to go all the way back to Truman to find a number that low when they're not reporting what the real number is. What they should be reporting is the 44%, I think, which is still a troublingly low number. Anyway.
Well, I think as far as polling is concerned, after Tuesday, we're going to have 3 data points on polling. We're going to have the polling in the election of 2008, 4, Barack Obama, and then his next term, and then Trump, and then we'll have this midterm and the other midterms. And I think we should look at that and figure out how accurate is our polling.
Because of all the changes in communication.
Right.
Because of all the changes in communications. And especially, I think that the voters that the polling organizations are able to contact are the older voters who answer their landlines.
And it's interesting because Obama got shellacked, his words, in the midterm, and it was over the health care issue, when today in the ABC poll, 50% of Americans find the Democratic Party better served to deal with health care.
It was a leading issue that people cared about, wasn't
it? The Democrats have done a good job of educating people about what the Health Care Affordable Care Act is.
That it was really a good bill.
That it is everything you've heard about Obamacare is actually the Affordable Care Act, and now you've been living with it and getting your chemotherapy and getting your dialysis and getting your children's well child visits. How do you like me now?
Yeah.
Well, we do. We like to have health care.
Yeah. But first we have to wrestle that message back from the Republicans who are claiming that they are the ones fighting for pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, that's crazy too.
We killed it, but we're going to save it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the very people who voted against it.
Not much of a wrestling match, really.
Yeah.
Answer this one. If 47% of the country thinks that Democrats are better served to handle immigration as opposed to 42% for Republicans, but only 39% of the public thinks Democrats can handle border security as opposed to 49% of Republicans.
But the overall immigration numbers were fascinating, and to see that it ranks so far below healthcare, and you've had here in Texas, all of these ads have been centered on immigration. Right. And it may be when we, next week when we gather and we've had a chance to read all the Monday morning quarterbacking, that may be the big miss of this election year, that they thought everybody was going to be motivated by these border issues. And
when it was healthcare.
And when it was healthcare.
I think it was healthcare all along. And we've been talking about that healthcare is the real issue in the country. And the Republicans are running from that, trying to make border security the issue. And that's why the president made this fake issue about this caravan 1,000 miles away. As what did Colbert say? They're moving at the speed of a walk.
I have a point about this midterm. So the Harvard Kennedy School of Institute of Politics found that 54% of 18 to 29-year-old Democrats plan to definitely vote, compared to 43% of Republicans and 24% of independents, which says that a lot of young people will be voting in this election, and that might be one of those difference makers when it comes to whether or not a blue wave actually happens. But another thing that was interesting is that the same group of young Democrats, young people, support a single-payer system of health care. They support government basically paying for educations at public schools. So some Democratic candidates, like what's the woman in New York, Ocasio,
Yeah.
they're running on those types of
Ocasio
issues.
Cortez.
And so, that's resonating with some younger
Some
voters.
young voters.
And
The problem with that argument is that they still don't have an answer for how do we pay for that.
That's exactly right. But you don't
Well,
really
don't undercut it.
You don't really have to have an answer. Donald Trump
Apparently
Yeah,
not.
Donald
yeah.
Trump is telling people that these
All right.
people in the
I
caravan
wanna
are
take-
going to
I
vote
wanna take
on
some-
Tuesday.
I want
As a
to
matter
get
of
some
fact-
audience interviews, but I want to bring up 2 more points before we do. There's 2 Texas polls now that show Beto O'Rourke within 2 points, and 2 polls showing him up 2 points. Where are we?
Depends
Behind.
on what poll you look at, and
Well, you hate polls, so I'm going to get your answer.
Okay,
Where are we?
so I think that
I think Beto
that
has
Cruz,
a great
I
chance.
think Cruz is still going to win.
There
Do
was
you? Okay.
There is a story out. I sent you all this morning. It's not in the notes. I sent you all this morning that he may actually turn Tarrant County. If he turns Tarrant County, he wins.
You sent
Period.
that story Friday.
Was that Friday?
Yeah, you
oh,
did.
I slept since then. If he turns Tarrant County, he wins the race. Period.
But that is another one of these pie in the
Yeah.
sky notions that if this factors in, then this happens. The
Yeah.
reality
Okay, wait,
is,
James.
this is a
So
red
if
state.
this was
Defeatist. Are you a Democrat or not?
I'm glad James said that, because James is a extremely good-looking, smart guy, but he's
I thought we
often
were talking about
run
James
about
Campbell.
these things. So I think if he's predicting Cruz, that means we have it in the bag for Beto.
no, but I
I think
think
that's more accurate than any poll.
there are a
That's
couple of
funny.
things. We're taping on Sunday, so there are a couple of things to consider here. We don't really know. We don't, with this many new voters, we really don't know where they've come from.
Right.
Most of the experts have written Beto off and said that he's not going to win, that there's too big a straight ticket vote for Republicans based on the analysis. And of course, everyone's known from the beginning that was likely to happen. Others have said that if he cuts it to less than 5%, then it's a huge victory and paints a really bright landscape here in Texas for the future. My big fear is that younger voters, especially those who've been drawn in from the first time, won't understand anything but winning and feel that this is a terrible setback and won't really want to stay engaged. So that's my very big fear. But I think a lot of stuff is being overlooked. I hate the way everybody just tries to say it's over before it's over. This has been an
James
incredible race. There is so much to learn from it here in Houston, win or lose, and that should be the major takeaway.
This
And
guy-
I haven't
this
and
guy-
I haven't given up.
This guy comes from El Paso to come within 2 points of Ted Cruz of winning a statewide race for the first time in over 20 years. It's a huge, huge
But-
victory.
Well,
Okay,
and
okay.
one more thing, and I'm sorry, but if the Republican Party had this attitude for Lord knows how long here in Texas, then they would not be the majority party here in Texas right now. They lost and they lost and they lost and they came close and they came back.
That's right,
and
James.
they kept trying.
Well, let me make one final point.
we aren't even there. We
The
have not
state's
played
changing.
the long game
But
that
the
the
state is
Republicans have
changing.
changed.
Okay.
So if we can learn anything from the Republicans, it is we need to look down the road
Absolutely.
and play the long game. And I swear, if we do not flip the House, it is over.
Yeah.
We are going to be voter
Well, I
suppressed.
think we're gonna
say
do
this
that.
every week. And we are going to be locked out. We're
But
not even
if
gonna
we
be able
do,
to-
but Andy, if we do flip it,
if we do flip it,
then
we
it's
need
an
to
investigation
fight. We need
per
to
month.
look.
Let a
but-
brother-
but I don't-
brother
I don't
make a
even
point.
wanna-
Let a brother make a point. So let me temper.
Oh yeah,
that
No,
was James who
let's
cut
make
you
it
off,
right.
Andy. I can't believe James did that.
Well,
I'm sorry.
that's because I have a hood pass. So let me make
Are you
one
saying
final.
mine's not good?
Do you know it? No.
It's not okay.
No. So what I want to suggest is, and I'm tempering my negative comment about Beto by saying this. There's a wild card in this, and I think, again, you have to go back to those factors that might swing this election, like if Tarrant County swings his way. I think because there's a large amount of Asian American voters who are not always counted as a possible minority. There was a Texas Monthly story that talked about how state representatives like Gene Wu and other Asian American,
Well,
South.
Siri Kulkarni here has run an amazing campaign
Yeah.
in Fort Bend County, reaching out to all the different Asian dialects.
That's
It's
exactly,
amazing.
That's exactly right. And so that may be another factor that can swing the race towards Beto. But, again, all these things have to come to fruition, Chris, to be able to happen. And I'm not convinced that that's going to happen.
You're right. But
Could be
but
amazing
what about
year.
the factor of John Culberson is not well liked.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
He's not
I
liked
agree.
by the people in his district.
Yeah.
And so whether and he has been a no-show for years, and now all of a sudden he remembered that he has a constituency, and he's been coming out and cheesing.
Yes.
But
he
is
lives
that
down the street
enough?
from me, and I've never seen the man.
Yeah.
Well,
and
so is that enough to turn it around? So that's a negative that you haven't factored in yet.
yes.
That he's got to overcome.
But here's another thing. When we went to sleep in 2016, we didn't think that Donald Trump would be president.
Oh, well, it was long before we went to sleep,
Yeah,
unless you go
yeah,
to
yeah.
on the 5th,
Carrie Bush.
the day before when we went to sleep, we didn't think there was any
So
way. he would
don't
be
discount Trump's base getting out and voting in droves. His closing argument is resonating with them. And
Now,
that's
you're
why
right about that. So I'm looking at a story, and this picture is amazing. At Trump rallies, women see a hero protecting a way of life. I don't know if you can, if we can see that. And there is just a row.
Just today?
Of this is today, Sundays in the Sunday paper. And why women
Paid.
would be voting for Trump?
Paid. They're paid.
Well, maybe, okay, I hope they're paid.
No, I don't
because-
think all that.
But I don't think that's true. And when I talk to some of my friends who I know are Republicans, I feel like they don't want to admit that they would vote for Trump. They're Republicans, and they kind of back away from him. They don't like him, but they don't have that passion. Like, there is no possible way he's a horrible person. So that is another factor.
But apparently
right?
there's this big divide, Andy, about they hate him as a person. They know he's vile, but the economy's doing well, so we have to measure that.
Yeah.
And so there's all that. It's
so
just
sick of hearing
crazy.
that. The economy's doing exactly what it was when Obama was in office, and they just forget about all that. All right, one more point. And I want.
Well, the economy's doing well under a white president.
Oh, well, that's
Well,
right.
well,
I
well,
forgot about that.
that's
I forgot
another
about
thing,
that.
In my critique of the press,
president.
this picture shows a line of white women across
All with blonde hair.
like 3 columns. At Trump rallies, women see a hero protecting a way of life. And if these women were black, I know they would say a line of black women. This headline really should say, see at Trump rallies, white women see a hero protecting, because they are the only women voting for Trump. So I'm not. I don't know exactly how to parse that.
See, this
but I know that
goes
that's
back
true.
to what we were talking about last week about whether we're going to really report honestly on some of this stuff
Right.
Yeah.
going forward. If we really are going to take on race, front on, I think you pretty much
we
have to
need
just
to
start
now.
kind of pointing that out.
Well-
we wanted to play like we had this colorblind society, and we weren't going to talk about any of this anymore because that would mean we see color. Well,
Somebody does.
But Chris, actually today on reliable sources on CNN, they were making that very point that papers are now pointing out lies.
Exactly. I heard that.
And they're also pointing out racist.
Because they have to.
And they
Yeah.
basically are saying the Trump video was racist. And that's something that's a change in the narrative that the media has.
I wrote a piece about that same video this week.
Yeah.
All right, one more point, then we're going to get some audience reaction. And we talked about words matter last week, and President Trump couldn't have made the point any better for us last week when he held a press conference from the Roosevelt Room in the White House and said if that caravan starts throwing rocks at our military, then they're going to treat those rocks as rifles. Well, the very next day, the Nigerian army, following President Trump's lead, mowed down a group of rock-throwing protesters and killed 40 of them, wounded 100. And when Amnesty International asked them why they did it, they played President Trump's press conference and said, you draw your own conclusions. President Trump then called at the very next opportunity when somebody asked him about it, he said, I never said they could shoot.
Okay, so first of all, I'd love to make that connection, but I think that I think that he is opening a door for nationalist, authoritarian type leaders, candidates running for office in other countries. Brazil is a prime example, but did Brazil elect that person because of Donald Trump? I can't think of his name, honest to God. But Nigeria, it's not like the Nigerian army has never shot at protesters. So let's not.
But they clearly used his words to justify
this.
They
did. So they used his words to justify it. Previously, they would have just said they didn't do it. So even I'm a little bit wary about like trying. I think that I think the danger is that yes, they're going to use the American president's words to justify their actions, but I don't necessarily think it's a cause and effect.
Really?
I don't know. I'm sure it'll get worse, but
John, I remember the country.
I'm really trying to be. I'm really trying to be good about. We know that this guy is a moron, but let's not attribute every bad thing that ever happened. Let's try to maintain some level of thoughtfulness about, and not just knee-jerk sort of reaction to everything that goes on.
Because that's what they did, and so let's not go.
Let's not be that. Let's be more thoughtful.
Fair enough.
And remember that
you shouldn't say when I'm talking.
Well, you mommied him a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I know.
There was a good reason for that.
Like an auctioneer.
So Trump also has generals at his side, and those generals will hear that and they go, "We're not even hearing that. We're not going to tell anybody to open up their rifle."
Mathis just went and strangled his past campaign manager after
everyone knows our military when they're dispersed in the United States will not have weapons because they're not allowed to do that. But the point is, I remember when John Kennedy was president. I don't remember that because I was too young. But when he was president, someone asked him about a country in South America, and I can't remember what the name of the country was, but he said we would accept a change in leadership in that country. And a week later, the president of that country was assassinated.
Chile. It's Chile.
And
some have suggested he was sending a message.
Well, that's what whoever killed that.
But Trump was not sending a message to any particular country about any particular
when
thing.
When the president of the United States speak, people listen.
He was
that's
talking to his base, Chris. He was trying.
When the president of the United States speak, about 1 billion people are listening every day.
Yes.
That's my point.
And that's why Major League Baseball sent a bunch of scouts down there to see what kid in that caravan had a really good arm.
Let's get some audience members come over here. Come on over here, and we're going to get some audience reaction about the election. Come on over here. Come on over here. Take this mic. Is this on? All right, come on. Right over here, straight up over here.
Well, Phil Donahue, you really have this worked out really well.
Yeah, okay.
That mic should be longer. Thanks for coming over. Tell us your name.
Jamal Haynes.
Jamal, have you already voted in this election?
Yes, I have.
Guess
I took advantage of early voting.
Ask you.
What do you think is going to be the result of the election?
I think Beto will come close, but I don't think he'll pull it out.
Why?
Other than me being a pessimist because I live in the state of Texas. I took a look at something a while back. One of my conservative friends told me that if you pay attention to the figures from the primary races, and if you look at the number of total Democratic votes and the total number of Republican votes, Ted Cruz in that Republican primary, he won that primary, but the total votes cast were 1.5 million, where in the Democratic primary is only 1 million, which means that he has 500,000 votes to make up to become competitive.
But
it's a lot.
That's a decrease from about 2 million.
First of all, I mean, but we're having record numbers of voters coming out this time, and I remember when Hillary Clinton was running, people were saying, well, there's no way Trump can win because he would have to win every state that from Massachusetts.
Well, there were like a ton of them, and they said there was no way it was going to happen. Exact same thing.
The guy, not from Utah, but from
one of the states,
running for president.
One of the other 49.
Oh, Jesus. Well,
it was Vermont, I think. Vermont, if the Democrats could finally turn Vermont.
We do this.
I can't.
This happens every week, Jamal.
Yeah, it does.
So tell us what you think the overall state of the country right now. Overall state of the country.
It's pretty doggone scary. The reason it's scary is because you have people that are yelling at each other instead of listening to each other. So, I mean, I wasn't alive during the first Civil War, but I have a feeling this comes close to it.
Yeah.
Because people are becoming more and more polarized based on what they're hearing on TV, on what the issues are. And the issues really aren't being presented clearly or factually.
Well, but at some point, though, folks have to actually hear what's going on. And so for years now, we've said we don't really want to say what we really think because that's not politically acceptable. And so the left doesn't really say what's on their mind and the right doesn't really say what's on their mind. And this morning on, I think it was CBS Sunday Morning, there was a civics professor saying we've had periods in our history where there was just as an intense divide and we come out better for it. And I have a feeling that now that people are finally getting to hear what folks are really saying, which I think maybe some of us always sensed was still out there, but we weren't hearing it, that maybe now we can start addressing it. And we do come out better.
What on earth was the left not saying?
I think
What now?
What was the left not saying that they coming out and what was the left not coming out and saying?
Oh, during this period.
Well,
Oh,
during the period
I
that
think
you
there
were
are a lot
talking
of
about when we
things. I
weren't-
mean, I think there are a lot of things on the left that people, I mean, you absolutely cannot talk about race. And at some point you have to talk about race and, you know, have an honest discussion about it. We've had discussions on this show, Andy, where I think, you know, I talk about the fact that some people believe that we had this post-racial movement, and you and James always laugh because y'all never thought it was that.
Right.
And
I just think
those
I
types
think
of
that
things, we can't. It's very hard to have that conversation.
The Republicans have always accused the Democrats of running on identity politics. There's half the country who thinks we talk about race too much. I don't know that. I think that we can be sure that the kinds of dog whistles and outright racist statements that we're hearing now are things that we always, James and I and other people, Belle, you just said, have always suspected people wanted to say, now they feel comfortable saying. But I don't feel like the same is true of the Democrats or the left. I feel like we've always said we want more inclusiveness, and we've talked about that.
We
But
say that.
I thought what Jamal was saying was, though, that there's a lot of people talking, but nobody's listening. And because nobody's listening, nobody's actually talking to anybody. And nobody's resolving anything because nobody's listening to anybody. Isn't that what you were trying to say?
That is 100% correct.
All right. And that's the issue, I think, what Jamal's saying. That
Objection leading.
And if we can't resolve that problem, we can't resolve any problem in the country. I think that's what you were trying to say.
That is correct.
All right.
Well, yeah.
Jamal, we're going to give you a couple of prizes here. This is our button. What's left?
Now, if you go
America.
right out and sell it, we're going to be very disappointed with you.
we see it
Worth
on
a fortune.
eBay.
Over there,
Better
over
not
there
see
on the
that on
bar,
eBay.
there is a beautiful bumper sticker, one term Ted. That you
You're
can
gonna
have.
want to slap that
Two
on
of
your
those.
vehicle.
Two of those. All right, thank you. We got one more audience member. Who wants to come over? Come on, somebody. You can't. You can't. Right, that
Come
young
on over
lady
here,
right there.
Jan.
Come on over there, young
Come
lady.
over here. Come over
You can
here.
bring your beer too.
And we should remind people we're broadcasting live from Dean's.
Dean's downtown, beautiful downtown Houston. We have a huge studio audience. Let's hear from them. Let's listen to that. All right, how about that?
Man, you talked about a fired up crowd.
Tell us your name, young lady.
Jennifer Gott.
Jennifer Gott. Wonderful to have you here today. So, have you already voted?
I have.
You have voted. Good for you. And so, what do you think is going to be the outcome here in the race in Texas?
Oh, I think it's going to be all over the map. And I am more of an optimist. I feel like Beto's going to pull it out because I think young people are really energized in a way that they haven't been before. I mean, it's really been amazing, like what's been going on the past couple of weeks during the early voting. And I'm just so impressed by the numbers. So I really think Beto might pull it out.
So if he doesn't, how do you feel on Wednesday morning?
Like I felt in November 2000. Was it?
But seriously?
I'm gonna curl up into a ball and like.
Well, I really did. I'm curious. Are you being serious? Because I really did in 2016. So is that the same effect that this has? Because that's frightening to me a little bit.
No, actually not. I mean, I will be disappointed if Beto doesn't. I mean, but I won't be horribly surprised. I was just stunned in 2016.
But I think what he's done is amazing.
So now we've been sort of
Conditioned for the
conditioned.
decision.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just realized I was talking about Culberson and Beto, but they're both Beto and Cruz are hated. So I guess you could just substitute the names. I just want to make that little correction. But what about Lizzie?
It's
And we should. Lizzie Fletcher is in one of the most watched races nationwide here because the long-term Republican congressman is finally challenged by a woman named Lizzie Fletcher, and it looks like she might pull it out.
I think yes, and so everything I said about John Culberson, I was making in reference to Lizzie Pennell Fletcher, but everybody already knows that everybody hates.
And
Cruz.
I'm rubber, and you're glue, and anything you say to me bounces off you and sticks on you.
And I've already
However you say
voted
that.
for Lizzie Pennell Fletcher.
So have you already voted?
I did. I already voted.
Have a lot of your friends voted?
I think almost all of my friends have voted.
Are you in your 20s, 30s, 20s?
A little. I
Just
plead the fifth.
just-
Why? Why? Why
And-
not?
and how
Why
much do
not?
you
Women
weigh?
don't care about things.
And are you pregnant?
Yeah. Whatever. Women are not delicate flowers who can't stand to have their age revealed. Oh my Jesus.
So my
But-
friends are all 30s and above.
yeah. And
so,
they voted.
every single one of my
Yeah.
friends have voted.
See,
so,
and I think that is why Beto's going to win.
so I
And the block walking that young people, I don't know, 40 different young people have come to my door because I haven't yet voted. As soon as you vote, your name gets crossed off the list and they stop coming to your house and leaving door hangers. So, they're all.
Did you find that strange that they were all people you knew?
So we're running out of time, but
I have one question. So
Well, hello.
What issues resonated with you in
Yeah.
this
I will
election?
tell you a story about that though.
Hang
after
on.
I did a little block walking.
Well, I mean, for me, I guess what
Other than voting against Trump.
well, that's huge though. But immigration's a big, a big thing for me. But I'm on the opposite side of, I guess, a lot of most conservatives. I'm just more concerned about how immigration I think Jeff Sessions is just tearing things down, and that people don't even realize like how broad that the changes are, and how it's affecting people
I
and
think
families and
Immigration and voting rights.
healthcare.
not as much for me, personally, but I do think it's a huge
And-
issue. But when I was in private practice, it was a
What
much
is it you
bigger
do
issue
for a
me.
living?
I work for the public defender's office. I'm an attorney.
You're an attorney, okay.
Yeah.
And so that's why you're focused more on the immigration side of things.
Right.
Okay. What do you think the overall state of the country is?
Very divided, like very polarizing, very divided. And I think it's actually really sad. I think things are getting much more violent. I think people are much more angry, and they're taking their anger out in a way that's, not healthy, obviously. I think that dialogue is getting lost.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of getting sick of the constant, 24/7 media, Trump. It's exhausting, actually.
All right.
So you think media is part of the problem?
Media, enemy of the state.
Well, not-
I'm
but-
just kidding.
but
I'm
not
enemy of the
what's
people.
left America.
No, I'm just kidding.
Not what's left America.
No, I think media is important. I think that it's necessary. I think it's horrible how Trump has tried to turn people against the media and like fake news. And I think that's awful.
But if more people listen to What's Left America, they would be enlightened.
You're exactly
Well-
right. That's exactly right.
But they can also get a great mix of the accurate and the inaccurate. And so, where else can you get that on?
Well, we'd like to give you one of our beautiful bumper.
Thank you.
And
pins
two? Does she
you
get
a
two
bumper
stickers
sticker,
too?
Get two
Okay.
bumper stickers on your way out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to have to move on. We're almost out of time here. So let's do our next topic here is Google open to all men. Google had a very bad week.
Oh, we spent a lot of time on the midterms.
That's
Sure
right.
did.
I knew we
I thought we were
would.
about to go to what's left,
it's
out of
coming
left
out.
field.
It's coming
Let's
out.
just spend a
Okay.
couple of minutes on this. Many claim that Google treats female workers inequitably. Others were outraged that Google had paid Andy Rubin, the creator of Android mobile software, a $90 million exit package. I wish somebody hated me that much. Chris, you have to leave. Here's $90 million. Okay, thank you. I'll leave. I will leave.
Oh, no. Please don't make me.
After they concluded that a sexual harassment claim was credible, they paid him $90 million. He left. That started after the New York Times reported on that. They started a walkout worldwide on Google. The organizers Also produced a list of demands for changing how Google handles sexual harassment claims, including ending its use of private arbitration. They want publication of a transparency report, further disclosures of salary and compensation, employee representative on the board, and a chief diversity officer to speak directly to the board.
Who would have thunk? Here we have this great progressive industry. I'm just hoping if we keep this podcast going, Andy will send one of her children to the tech industry so we can really understand what's going on there. It's bizarre. I mean, I thought this was the most liberal, progressive community, kind of hip and kind of with everything in the reports from Uber to Google. It doesn't matter. It's just as dysfunctional and awful as anything you could ever hope to hear.
The tech industry
That's
grew
what they
up.
want you to think.
Well, the tech industry grew up after all of this struggle.
Right.
And I thought it was all behind.
So, Andy,
Well, look how
explain
much-
it all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hold on. I'm going to explain it all to you. So, it.
Or let us in on the joke, please.
yeah, at least.
we did think this was like don't be evil.
Yes.
It was gonna be great. We're gonna have ping pong at work. Take as much
Yes.
maternity leave as you need.
Yes.
Well, we're finding out, in fact, a lot of things about American life that we didn't know.
They
and
brought
one
back
thing about the
open office space.
oh,
I hate that.
and
Yeah, no
How
kidding.
much
I'm
did you
okay
like
with
sitting
it.
in the
Hey,
newsroom?
stop.
kinda liked it, but-
Half my office building is open office.
yeah,
space.
I kind of liked it. I did miss having a door so I could take a nap sometimes. but the thing
All you
about
need
it
is a desk and an
the-
area underneath.
the sexism in the American workplace has never ended, and you had a culture where these companies wanted you to believe that they were doing good in the world. They liked that image, but in fact, if you just scratch the surface, you could see that yes, they will do your dry cleaning and they will let you play ping pong at the office, but
But heaven forbid if you want to get in upper
if you-
management.
or you don't want somebody grabbing your ass, every other minute. I think that the thing that people need to remember about sexual harassment is that it is a work issue. It is not a sex issue. So you sexually harass a woman at work and she leaves and she is locked out of an industry. And it is not about how she looks or what she wore or what he wanted sexually, or if he wanted to date her. And does that mean we can't flirt anymore? No, it is an issue about women being welcome in the workplace or not.
But then if you're Andy, seriously, I don't mean to cut in, but if you're always the minority, I mean, there are obviously a lot more men in tech than there are women.
Yeah, well, that's
So
exactly what
if
I'm talking about.
And
Why
so
is
if you're
that?
the minority, then you have to do all the balance beam issues, right, in order to
Well,
try to.
what I'm trying to say is that the reason women are the minority in so many occupations is because they get sexually harassed out of the industry, and then they're not represented, and it's sort of a vicious cycle.
But
There
in
was
that sense, is tech any different from any
Anywhere
other
else.
industry
Anywhere
where
other-
women,
Well, that's what
there
we're
weren't
finding-
as many
But
women
tech
as
was-
that's what
men,
we're
and
finding
so
out,
women.
isn't it?
But tech was supposed to be better.
That
It
was
was
going to
supposed
be
to be
the
better.
glass
But they
breaker, wasn't
And,
it?
and we were all supposed to be transracial,
Yes.
or post-racial, but
Yes.
we're not. And I
Right.
think that so.
Well, I'm
we're not gonna
transracial.
be.
Just trans.
Well, there is no. We're not being trans anymore. Because that's well. We
I have
haven't even
no response
talked
to
about
that.
that. We haven't
None.
even talked about.
So in 2015, I sent you all this survey. In 2015, the Elephant in the Valley did a survey of 100% female.
That
people.
one we didn't read.
Well,
no,
you should
that
have.
does not even sound familiar.
You should have 100% females in the Silicon Valley
Women.
that did this, that participated in this survey. 84% of them said it's difficult for women in tech to strike the right balance between being seen as too meek or too harsh. And I thought
But
that
that's
was
the
very
same
interesting.
thing we've seen in law.
Yeah.
I
That's the
mean,
same thing we've seen on
you're
What's
a-
Left
You're
America.
a great lawyer, and you're an assertive lawyer as a female, and then are you
woman.
The names that
Can they not
are
hear me?
attached go down the list. So
Was somebody speaking?
Yes.
were you talking? It was like almost being like I was Gladys Knight and she was the Pips.
66% said they have no seat at the table. 59% said they they have not had the same opportunities as their male counterparts. 90% said they witnessed sexist behavior at company offsites or industry conferences. It's the same stuff you see in every industry in the United States.
Absolutely. I don't know if it's every industry, but
Pretty much.
I do think that there are places where it's interesting. Where men dominate in a field, and it is never because the women can't keep up, they're not competent enough, they're not strong enough. It is always because they are harassed out of the business.
But they're judged differently, don't you think?
Of course they are. And in those industries where women predominate, they tend to be lower paid, and men don't want those jobs. And so it's interesting that one of the problems we have low unemployment right now, but there is a sector of the workforce made up of men who will not take jobs where women predominate, even though there are lots of openings in those fields. So
Andy,
men
one
don't
question.
want women in their field, and men don't want to work in fields that are dominated by women.
Yeah, so I have a point to make, and you could agree with this. When we
We'll
started in the industry, in the newspaper industry, the media, so-called enlightened liberals, when we got to the Chronicle, the women ran the features department,
Right.
and the men ran the news department,
Right.
the business
The
department.
business, yeah, and sports.
Exactly.
Yeah, and women were relegated to features.
That's exactly
and I think
right.
you and I were like among the first on the news desk. I was amazed when I came to the Chronicle in 1987. When did you get there?
88.
In 87, I looked around the newsroom and I said, oh, well, there's a group of black reporters. They were copy messengers.
Yeah.
There were
Andy,
no other.
But you know
but
what?
I'm curious if you ever sat in on a job interview for a candidate for a woman where it's you and a man, and then the evaluation is like 180 degrees different because you're hearing one thing and they're hearing something completely different.
In
Or
orchestras,
if not in that context, something else.
Sure, in orchestras where you have to audition for your job, when orchestras tended to be male dominated by men until they decided they needed to put up a screen so that the evaluators couldn't tell if it was a woman or a man auditioning. As soon as they did that, the ratio between men and women started looking more like 50-50. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, I just want to point out that when we formed What's Left Media, we named Andy the CEO immediately.
I think I named myself, and I just
And nobody objected.
and nobody was brave
objected.
enough to object.
And so
That's exactly right.
you are the CEO of a major media company. So there you go.
All right. Can we
Let's
get
go-
to out of
Let's
left
go to out of
field?
left field.
One small
I-
step for man,
And
One
I
giant foot in the ass
leap for
by
womankind.
women.
and we're gonna go to out of left field, and I nominate Andy to go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So, so here's the thing, if your parents or your grandparents or your crazy uncle watches Fox News, take the remote, go to the parental controls, block Fox News. They will not know how to undo that. They will wonder, why can't I see Fox News anymore? They will start watching MSNBC and CNN, and all of a sudden, Thanksgiving is a wonderful place to be. They will be informed. They will have things to say that are not crazy town. And they may even one day vote Democrat. Try it at home with your crazy uncle.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Thank you.
So there's a new movie that just came out called Bohemian Rhapsody about the group Queen.
Which I love.
And so I was thinking about this in this context, revisionist history. So I reached out to Rick Mitchell, who all of you know used to be the music critic at the Chronicle. And I said, Rick, I just heard an interview with the lead actor on NPR about Bohemian Rhapsody and Freddie Mercury having this incredible vocal range. And I texted him, I said, what do you think? He says, James, why do you care? Have you heard the music? No swing, no funk, really no rock and roll, just bad music. So I just want to
I love Bohemian Rhapsody.
So I just want to point out that when you hear Another One Bites the Dust or We're the Champions, you know, that's just a great anthem stadium song. It's not good music. And we grew up, I'm a boomer, so any millennials or any generations after that, Queen and Freddie Mercury, that was really bad music. And I say that to say this. I don't want to, like, if I live long enough to see Donald Trump revised as a great president when we know he's a bad president. So that is my take, and that's about revisionist history and how such a short time Queen could become the subject of a movie that people are going to see, and when they hear "We Will Rock You" or "We're the Champions," they're gonna go, "I love that song."
That was some good songs.
Well,
We
that
like
is
that song.
really,
and that's the
really.
difference between people who just love the music versus the critics who, you know.
Well,
Well,
count
even
me
more
as a
bizarre
critic.
that every time I get in James's car, "We Are the Champions" is blaring. So I don't know what's up with that.
When I was in middle school, we had I was Bichola number 3, and we used to sing "We Are the Bicholas" down the hall until we got in trouble with the headmaster, who came into the bathroom and told us to come to the office. It was very scary.
All right.
We are the Bicholas. Okay.
So 2 white guys, a black guy, and a biracial woman walk into a bar. It sounds like the beginning of a great joke. It really
No,
isn't.
actually, it
I
does
just think
not.
it's interesting. In all this time of great despair, here we are in Dean's downtown doing our podcast. What's Left America? I hope after Election Day, Democrats stay engaged. I'm encouraged, and we'll talk about it all next week and what it means for the future. But it's been a fun run so far, guys, and I'm happy that we did our first live shot on the eve of the
live
of the
show,
election.
live
That's right.
show.
Live
So
show.
My left field, votes matter, and I have never missed an election since I turned 18. I voted one time in Huntsville, Texas, when I was in college in an election. I got down there. I knew it was election day. I went down there, and there was only one guy on the ballot, and I voted. I just didn't want to miss an election.
Who was it, Chris?
I don't remember, but it was voting is an important right. It's a fundamental right, and nobody should miss it. And I'm encouraged about the fact that 4 million people voted in Texas in early voting. So I looked up some close elections. In 1960, in the presidential election, John Kennedy, U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, defeated then Vice President Richard Nixon by 115 votes in Hawaii that year, and won the nationwide popular vote by just 113,000 votes. It's been reported that had just one person voted for Nixon in each precinct in the United States, he would have won. 1962 Minnesota governor's race, it took more than 4 months to determine that then Lieutenant Governor Carl Rollvag, the Democratic Farm Labor Party, won the election by 91 votes. 1964 U.S. Senate race, Democrat Howard Cannon, 24-year Senate veteran, bested then Lieutenant Governor by 48 votes out of 135,000 votes. Jump forward
Only
to
4
2000.
decades to go.
Hang on. Jump forward to 2000 presidential election in Florida when U.S. George W. Bush defeated Al Gore by 537 votes out of 6 million votes cast in Florida. And here's the most important one, really. In 2008 Minnesota U.S. Senate race, longest lasting Senate battles ever, Democrat Al Franken edged incumbent Republican Norm Coleman by 312 votes out of 2.9 million. And that gave the Democrats a 60-seat Senate majority.
What are you saying here?
So don't ever say that your vote doesn't count. By those few votes, all of those counted and mattered. And if you didn't go to the poll and you didn't vote, none of those would have mattered, or those people would have lost had just a few more people voted. So never say, and never ever say your vote doesn't count. That's all.
We are the champions. We
friend.
are the champions.
That
Come
is
on,
just-
everybody. We are the champions
That's just
of the
bad
world.
music.
That
Are
is.
people really sincere when they say, I don't care how you vote, just vote? I care how you vote.
Yeah, that's why we do
You're
this
not voting for the
podcast.
right people, please don't
Vote
vote.
left.
Here.
That's all. Fortunately, that's all the time we have today. Much thanks to Dean's Downtown for letting us come in. Much thanks to our studio audience
Yeah.
coming in today. Like us on, I'm getting there. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Rate us on iTunes. More important, what do we need to do, Andy?
Subscribe, guys.
Subscribe. It's all about subscriptions. Go to Libsyn or your favorite podcasting site and subscribe to What's Left America. We got to thank Vertical Ascension. You got to change the name of this. Vertical Ascension Entertainment for taping us, and Keegan DeLay, our in-studio producer. We'll be back next week.